That's correct. Both of them.
Seth, how are you doing?
All right.
Good.
Yeah,
Looks like we're gonna have a decent day out there.
a little windy, but it's nice out.
Yeah.
You didn't do what I did with mine once, back to the shed, busted it. Run loading on it. That's happened. Master's got a little piece of metal about this long. And, I could pull it into a building and bust that piece of metal. You don't bring anything else. That's good.
Talking to Julie last night.
I know it works.
Oh, yeah.
They live in town now.
Yes.
They're building that new house.
It's got a light. Maybe I'll know how to out the lights on it. If I see it. That's my fault. I've never seen it.
Using our house in transition, Jenny weren't out in time, so they rented an apartment
I
somewhere.
went and saw her from their apartment yesterday.
I bet, yeah.
It's like, living room, couch.
Good.
Yeah, it's pretty small, cause they come from a big house.
It's too, I know, it's too bad we couldn't make that work for them, but.
Yeah.
You know, so now I'm trying to use this.
She went to my nanny for it on Mondays.
Oh.
So it just saves all your files and writing.
And then what I do is
I've always been her favorite niece
sort
of
of
all.
So she was a poll worker too this year already.
Yeah.
So,
We need somebody to Taylor, and I was like,
I keep walking in, I go upstairs and I hear this. Of course, it's bright out and I know I'm still trying to see.
Yeah.
You know who I am? Like, let my eyes adjust here. It's like, oh.
yep, she's right back. When I come back, I can work calls. Like, okay, first to work.
Yeah.
I'm surprised to hear, it doesn't make me move. Hey, guys,
Yeah, I love it. I have a terrible
That's the whole trouble. I'd walk up
Yeah.
there. Well, if I had, I guess it really did make me
But I like how
well, they probably are, but they'll tell you too, like, it was 20 years ago, I got an observation. It's 20 to 25 years like that, which it's the way things go. I don't know what else you're gonna do about it.
Ran her out already, huh?
Why not? Some people that don't need for it, or some people that do against it. Well, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. Yes. Like I said, but when I come and gave you the first one, and I have it, so that's stupid.
That's what we're gonna be talking
All I
about.
guess I should say is,
No.
the Michigan
That's
Federal
what they
Right
said last week.
and was last week.
It's like I'm expecting something.
That's all you can do.
Now,
You, I don't know, you can't go anywhere.
No, that was the tower one. That's just like, that's just a small one.
Very thorough, she like.
So far, really
Oh, yeah.
I love that because it took me a
That
while
can
to
be
find
good.
it.
If it could read what I wrote.
Okay, well, assistant fire chief in training.
This is good. especially in docks.
Oh, okay, I found it.
How small batteries.
Okay. Starts out as the E-25. Yep, that's it. Yep, that's the one.
No calls today. It is like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I went to the plant. I don't know why they do this for people out. Me too, I didn't have to be lost a lot.
I just turned it up when I got in here.
I know, it's just cold. You wanted to warm my hands up, didn't you?
You will?
Right?
Once the contract's signed, no change orders. Always has mine.
Should change too.
Questions here, anyone have any? I was wrong, there's 237 feet.
And it's a pretty long contract. Oh,
Yeah, there's a bunch.
yeah. I'm glad you're doing it, not me.
Open up, pledge allegiance, sir.
I guess we can, we're still waiting for two yet.
Oh,
Sheriff,
and the sheriff and who?
lawyer,
Okay.
and attorney.
They're right together.
So, we start off with the pledge of allegiance before I read.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
See, it works.
Still working here. Hello, how are you? I think that one must get my coat off. Sorry, Billy.
I'm always cold.
Yes, you are. You can do it something as simple as this with her,
How are you doing?
and her hands are cold.
Yeah.
Oh, my.
I'm like you.
I guess we could get started.
Who's gonna take the lead?
We'll have Diana take the lead. She can explain the,
Okay, so, we presented Mr. Thompson?
howdy,
Hi, Diana Richardson.
Diana.
So I know the county has worked with, a consultant, and last December they requested a bid for us to do an upgrade to the network to make it P25 capable. And, to build out the infrastructure for a new radio network for the whole county. And so we were given some requirements from the consultant. We put together a proposal. Over the course of the next few months, there was some tweaking requested by the users and through the consultant. We tweaked that, and then were asked for a contract in April, I believe. And so we submitted a contract in April, and we had some pricing concessions in that. The contract covered different pieces: the infrastructure to build out the radio network, all the labor and parts to do that, the civils, which is, you know, the tower site, any upgrades, any new towers that needed to be built, generators, shelters, all the things that you would need to support the equipment that's going to be on the system. And then also the radios that would go into the end user's hands, which believe you had a committee, Scott and Sheriff and Dan Ramelsberg was on that with the consultant, and had defined for us what radios they wanted and how many. And we put those together into the contract and submitted that then to the consultant and to the county back in April. And so that had I think it was a July 1st deadline for the pricing on it. And July 1st, I don't believe the county was ready to make a move yet. And so we had asked, you know, at that point we didn't know what was going to happen, but we went back to our radio vendor and said, can we get an extension? So at that point they gave us an extension until the end of September, at which point now costs have gone skyrocketing. And so at this point, we've been able to get one more final extension to the end of November on the contract pricing we've got. If we had to reprice this thing today, I am sure it would be, what, at least $1 million higher because of all the costs incurred.
I'd say at least 10% higher.
Yeah, which would, you know, so this cost has significantly gone up in our tower crews, in the steel, the radios, and there's so many different pieces of this. So the meeting today is to look at, you know, it makes good sense right now to move on the contract as it is, if you would like to, with this final extension, so that we can save the county money in the long run. Because if this goes out to next year, you'll be paying, you know, we're gonna have to reprice it, and you'll be paying the current costs.
My question is, how many towers do we have to get?
There's 5 tower sites. We're gonna use 3 of your existing sites.
Okay,
And then there was 2 areas that we needed to put new towers in because there was leased towers, but the consultant said, no, the county does not wanna pay lease fees. And so we looked at putting in, over the course of, you know, time, between 7 and 8 years, typically you can build and have that tower paid for up front. And when you start leasing something for, you know, 15, 20 years, you're gonna pay for the tower 2.5 times. So it's less expensive, and that's why the consultant said, replace the leased towers with new, what we call greenfield towers. And so we looked and spent significant engineering time looking at what towers, what locations will be the most effective so we can put in the least amount of towers to give you the most coverage. Because we were given specific cities that you required indoor coverage for, and so we wanted to make sure that those key cities that you had most population in had coverage indoors, even in commercial style buildings for the public safety, because indoor public safety is, you know, or indoor coverage is really a public safety spec, and so we complied with that.
now Norway's one of the 2, right?
No, Norway, we were not able to use because the Norway site is, A, it was too low, B, it was close to a cemetery, and so Iowa SHPO doesn't allow us, the State Historical Preservation doesn't allow us we have to abide by their rules when there's a tower site next to a cemetery. So we went to a civil engineer and said, what can we do? Can we put up a new site? And he said, you can, but according to the Iowa State Historical Preservation Organization, you can only build it up another 30%, which would put it at 130 foot. It's about 100 foot now. And we needed a 200-foot tower to cover the indoor facilities for the towns that site was gonna cover. And so those were key pieces, but also our engineers went and looked at the tower and said it's not structurally sound enough to hold the equipment. So there'd also, I mean, we can only build it to 130 feet. If we tore it down and put up a new one, according to Iowa SHPO, it's not us, this is them telling us what we can do. We can only build it another 30% higher. So it isn't gonna, you're not gonna be able to get the microwave between the towers, and you're not gonna be able to get the height you need to saturate the areas that we need to cover.
Where are you planning on putting it to?
We've got suggested locations. So just so you know how this typically works is we've suggested locations to put the new tower sites. And now once we get a signed contract, we start working with you, and our engineers have said, okay, here's an area that if we put it in this area, here's the optimal area, here's the optimal piece of land, but now let's work together to see what can we get. And so it's a process we go through with every county that we work with to find out, well, will that landowner let us use the land? If not, what's, close by that we could get, and how will that affect coverage? So every time we move the tower, we have to reevaluate how is it gonna affect the coverage. So it's a process that we go through, and it's called the detailed design process. And we work with the county through this process to get to a point where we find where can we have our final, where can we locate these sites at. Sometimes we, are able to put them right where we asked to have them. A lot of times we have to move it a little bit, one way or another to satisfy a landowner. And so we'll work with the county until we get a final design that they accept. And at that point, we'll have a detailed design review with our engineering staff, our civil staff, and management, and go through the whole design with the county and look at what's the final design that we've come up with, what sites have, what locations have we gotten permissions to put those towers on, and how is the final coverage gonna look for the county. And when that's acceptable, you sign off on that, that's when all the build starts. That's when we start ordering equipment. So that's part of the process of the contract, is working through that. We do upfront engineering on it, hundreds of hours actually, to find how we can position this to use as many of your existing sites as we can, and what we need to do to enhance the network with the least amount of additions of towers, so that we can give you the coverage that.
Yeah, that portion of the process, I mean, if you have further questions about that can be a little bit confusing, right, in terms of how that's done. And so we're kind of happy to talk about it some more if you really want to know more about that.
Does the airport down Cedar Rapids interfere with your tower placement?
Airports in general do. Like, you have to be at least a few miles away. You can't be on the runway path, that type of thing. So there are FAA requirements. So yeah, like the one in Cedar Rapids is too far away to impact anything here, but in general they do, sure.
It's about 15 miles, maybe.
Yeah, I would say
17.
2 and 3 is kind of the limiting.
Your bid packet, then you got, in the bid, you got towers figured in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Just don't know where you're gonna put them.
Yeah, so the way the process works, because this next phase of the contract, right, after we have agreement on it, it can last 3 to 6 months. It's what's referred to as site acquisition, where we've designed it optimally such that we know that we can get you the coverage, the public safety grade of coverage, with 5 sites, and we know about where they have to be, right? Some of them are locked in because of existing towers. The others, we just know we need to be kind of close to this area, right? Because like there's a certain distance from the towns. We have to make sure that we can kind of get out to the county borders, and so it has to be around there, and we know that we have to be at a certain height. Now, we have some latitude as to where that is, because as long as we're at the same height, and as long as we don't have geographical considerations that would cause problems, like, you know, along rivers and bluffs and stuff like that, where, you know, if you move a half mile, you're on the wrong side of a ridge. So we know that general area we need to be in. So that's kind of the point where it's like, okay, we know what we're doing. The amount of radio equipment and all is not changing. And we know what the tower is going to cost. And so we're kind of able to move forward. And then what we really need is probably, like the Sheriff, I think that you would be a big part of this. The relationship with landowners, right? If we can't get on county property, can we get on municipal property or something where your costs are as low as possible? And hopefully, maybe not at all. Or are there friendly farmers, right, that have been friends of the public safety community for years, and maybe they would be very cooperative in setting up a long-term lease of the amount of ground that we need. But that's the type of thing, you don't want a independent business asking that, driving that. This is about them supporting the community. So we basically go through that phase, and then what Diana is referring to, like the next major milestone is that those 2 locations have been secured. We have vetted them to make sure that, yes, it's gonna work without impacting design. Yes, we can get our microwave loop that connects everything. We have line of sight between the tower sites. And then once we have that, then we basically finalize all of our detailed build drawings. And that's a milestone where you guys sign off on that. You say, yes, we have a design that can be built. So now go ahead and start the manufacturing process, and you know, and some other types of engineering costs.
Can a guy get an exemption on a cemetery deal down like in Norway?
No.
They won't grant one?
That site is off limits. There's no way we can use that site.
Really?
Not gonna
We can't put another tower right next to it?
You can, but
we
you
can.
you can build on that ground exactly, it can't be, but it can only be 30-foot
Yeah.
high.
From an engineering standpoint, it will not work for one.
I'm not even talking about using that tower, I'm talking putting a new one right next to the chain link fence.
We cannot. There are regulations that will not allow us to build it at the height that we would need in order for it to work.
Are there any, do they offer exemptions on that? They do not offer-
We've consulted with civil engineering who said absolutely, positively, no, will not work.
Now, the other counties got this same radio network.
Yeah, a lot of
Tama-
counties around.
Tama County, what about Iowa County?
Iowa County has it, Marshall County has it, Lynn, Johnson.
Blackhawk.
Buchanan,
Dubuque, Quad Cities, yeah, it's all
Sorry.
over.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is you get down south of Blairstown or south of the Blacktop going to Belle Plaine, it gets pretty hilly. So are all the communications gonna go through Benton County towers, or are they gonna go through an Iowa County tower to hit?
That's a great question, Gary, because this is a very cooperative relationship where the counties are all working with each other, and you become part of a group that basically shares the coverage. Because you might have medical transports, you might be on a pursuit or something like that takes you beyond your traditional coverage boundaries. But all of these systems interoperate such that, and there are agreements that all the counties have signed with each other, almost like a mutual aid type pact, that says, yes, when you travel over to mine because you're on one of these wide area pursuits or transports or whatever, that yes, your radio could actually connect through an Iowa County tower because the coverage in that area is better than what your coverage would provide, and the call is still routed back here to dispatch and to the other officers.
I'm thinking of Hannon Lake in particular. It's a public area.
Yeah.
And it's right next to the Iowa County border.
Yeah. Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is the advantage, we built the system for your county without looking at what they have, but you're gonna be tied to them, so you're gonna have additional coverage from these surrounding counties.
Yeah.
We just wanna make the system so that you're not reliant on them to have coverage.
Where's the second tower supposed to go?
There's gonna be a tower, you've got 3 existing towers. One is one that you're in the process of purchasing from us outside in Garrison. The other one in Van Horn, and another one in Belle Plaine. So those are the 3 existing tower sites that we'll be using. And then there'll be a new site, due east of Vinton, and I've got a little map that I can pass around here that you can see. Due east, and then another one in the southeast corner down in the Norway area, but far enough away from the cemetery that we won't have any issues with the state. So these are the 3 existing sites. Here's one of the new sites, which we call the East Greenfield, and the Southeast Greenfield, which is down covering that Norway area.
Then as for the cemetery down there, I'm really familiar, that's my stomping grounds. If a guy would move that tower, say northwest from the cemetery, let's just say at the most it would only be a mile away, maybe 3/4 a mile away, but would carry on that,
This is how we-
what I call the timber ridge. You can't see the cemetery for the Norway Grove. Timber, that timber's probably, somebody will quote me if we're being recorded, 80 acres or better. So, I mean, would that suffice?
I don't know, like, I mean, we have an engineer that does the modeling to test all these sites. So where he has placed it currently it's been optimized.
It's defined in the contract, there's, we added the whole proposal that we presented to the county into the contract so that you would have all that detail. And I didn't print it, it's like 237 pages, so I didn't print the whole thing.
He's
But
got it.
there is a section in there that will tell you exactly whose land they currently have that sitting on.
But also, Tracy, like, in terms of potential moves for that site, we can absolutely evaluate those with you, right? Because I think what you're suggesting is, can we get far enough away from the cemetery without kind of where maybe the terrain wouldn't cause us an issue, and that particular location, like if you have a landowner that is agreeable to it, those are the types of iterations that in this next phase, we would absolutely evaluate those with you, right? But the amount of work it takes to investigate each new site, I mean, it's probably 25 hours of our engineer's time. So that's why it needs to be collaborative, where ultimately this thing can only be built where you're gonna find a landowner or something that's gonna be cooperative, right? So we know we have to go through that process.
Okay,
And so,
that's my question is,
absolutely.
I haven't talked, I know all the farmers around there, know them real well. I did not wanna even mention any of this.
Yeah.
You know, until, I mean, to me, you wanna start talking to them first. And if you can find somebody that'll agree to letting them lease a portion of it, you know, cause I could not speak for anybody because I don't know. I'm sure 200 foot, you're gonna have guide wires on it.
No, we did self-support so that we
Really?
have this least amount of
That'd be a lot
space.
easier to sell
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
Yeah. But that kind of thing, that is what we fully expect this next phase to be, right?
Okay,
If we can get it done in 3 months, great. If it's gonna take 6, that's the, if you wanna call that a bottleneck,
okay.
that has to happen before the rest of the project can move forward.
Okay.
So we're basically, I don't wanna call it we're in a delay mode, because that's such an important part of, but that is something that we would anticipate spending the next several months. It's very intensive from an engineering standpoint, as well as some work on your part, going out and talking to these landowners and seeing what the potential is, but that is the collaboration that will happen next.
Okay.
I've got a question. You are,
Terry Brennan, I'm one of the owners of Brinkman.
well, it's good to be you, isn't it?
I'm not sure, it's on some days.
Just a quick question. So these potential tower sites, you haven't actually located them yet? You just maybe have general ideas?
Well, we've located them in terms of
Kind of
property and general area, you know, based on the landscape and terrain. So we picked the spot, but that isn't vetted, right?
And also, we haven't spoke to any prospective landowner
Correct.
yet? Okay.
Correct.
And so, for instance, in your contract for these green tower sites, which would be the two new ones, is that price that's a little over? It's a little over $1 million. Does that include the land acquisition, or is
No,
that
it does not
separate for
include,
us?
No.
right, it does not include land acquisition. So the hope would be that you can either find land free, get on it for very low cost or whatever, but that would be an agreement between you and whoever the landowner is.
Okay. If we get into a situation, and I would like to think that we would make a decent enough offer that we wouldn't have a problem, but if we got into an eminent domain situation, how does those types of delays impact this contract and the project? Or would we just say, find another location to try to
Yeah,
negotiate,
it
another
really,
landowner to negotiate with?
yeah, our intent is that it will not impact your pricing, right? So we do understand that if it takes us a year, we're both burning a whole lot of time, right? Trying to get that done. So it's not in anybody's best interest, because if it takes us 6 months longer to lock those sites down, that's 6 months longer before they get a radio system, right? Because nothing else can happen until that's done. But the only thing that potentially would really impact our pricing and cost is if we move somewhere and now we're either 100 feet higher on a hill or we're 100 feet lower. Well, now the tower site probably has to either be shorter or taller. But we've kind of looked at this, and we've kind of locked in the point where we feel very comfortable with the cost we've included, such that you will not undergo a change order.
Question for you, just going through this contract, I see that we have a clause here that there's a system discount for $227,000. Are you still gonna honor that? Because it said the contract had to be signed by July 1st of this year to get it.
That has been extended to November 30th.
30th.
It shows here November 30th.
Yeah. Here's the,
Okay, I'm going.
David, that is our big driver.
yeah. here's
Because
the current
from a
one
cost
that we did
perspective-
to extend it. You can have that copy.
Thank you.
So everything's the same on that sheet, other than this section where I extended.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, mine,
July.
someone gave me dated material.
That's what they sent me.
Okay, that's why I'm asking.
There's all that whole thing is wrapped up into a PDF file that I think was dated a couple weeks ago.
Nope, that was just $227,000. That's, a lot of corn dogs at the Benton County Fair.
It's a lot of corn.
They were in earlier today, remember? By a lot of corn dogs.
Yes, and that is, when Diana was referring to the cost increases and all, that is from what the manufacturer of this equipment, that is a discounted. They're a public company, so their incentive was to do this so that they could look at.
And if I may, earlier, Diana, you said that prices need to be locked in, or are locked in until what date?
Until November 30th. That's why I modified the.
I just wanna make sure, I thought you said the end of November. but
Yeah,
I
the end
wanted
of
to make sure.
November. Yeah.
And then that's when all, what breaks loose and prices go up?
We're gonna need to requote the whole job, because another thing that we were going through this morning, the cost of having someone climb a tower and mount antennas, we know, as of today, we already know that our raw cost is gonna be $75,000 higher than we quoted to you. So, but we've had this proposal on the table, so that's why we're gonna honor it through November 30th. If that timing is not gonna work out for you, we feel like we need to rebuild the whole job.
Okay. I just had a few questions, thank you.
Yeah.
The grand total of this is $7,053,334.26, correct?
Correct.
Of which you need a 10% down to bind the contract, correct?
Yeah.
So 5,000.
Well, you've got to also, though, to get that discount, don't they also have to agree to the 10-year maintenance agreement?
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, one's capital, one's operating
okay.
budget, but yes, you're correct.
Yeah.
And what is the cost of the, and I apologize, someone gave me this a little bit earlier today. What is the maintenance agreement, you're all right. What does the maintenance agreement money do?
That probably wouldn't start for probably 3 years, because you have, if you call it 2 years to build the system, you have the first year that's kind of included in the up, and so the maintenance doesn't start till after that, probably 3 years
Well,
from now.
after your final acceptance, 1 year later, you would start with maintenance. And it typically takes 18 to 24 months. Right now, with all the supplies slowing down, we're looking at 24 months.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The maintenance agreement, what does that entail? What do
I'm
you-
sorry, can I finish one thing?
Sure.
Rick? And that maintenance agreement then is broken up into annual payments.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
What does that entail? What do you cover with that? Is it somebody drops a radio, you replace it or fix it or whatever? Or is this equipment with a tower? What is the maintenance agreement?
So there's a lot covered in that. So our approach and what we're trying to do is to make it comprehensive, right? And so that it's everything from and like the hardware repairs, all the labor. We will be monitoring the network 24/7. Cause like all this stuff is, you know, like computer systems, like they're built with so much redundancy. The whole idea is that to the end user, they're supposed to be masked of any problems that are going on, right? So we actually monitor that 24/7 at our headquarters facility. Like every public safety system we do, we monitor it, you know, in Marshalltown, such that even though the users might not experience anything, we know what's going on in the hood, so that we can proactively take care of it. The reason we do it 24/7 is because their operation is 24/7. And so, and you know, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning on Christmas morning, if it's an emergency repair, we're dispatching out people to take care of that, get it back up and running, and there is no additional cost for you guys on that. Also, we have the, you know, like with any type of IT type infrastructure, there's like software maintenance, right? Everything is kind of software driven anymore. So you need the software maintenance programs from the manufacturer who are constantly doing the maintenance and upgrades on those to keep them compatible.
And end-user hardware.
And then end user hardware. So there are a few things that are considered consumables, like, you know, batteries. Batteries, there are rechargeable batteries, but you know, those things can last a couple of years. You just gotta replace them.
Reprogramming, all the reprogramming that they ever need is gonna be taken care of in the,
Yep, unlimited reprogramming.
Okay.
Actually,
As part of the
unlimited
maintenance
retraining of the users.
pardon?
As part of maintenance agreement?
Yes.
Yeah. So that maintenance is meant to be, pretty much cover everything. Like a lightning strike or an act of God would not be covered, but that's usually something that you get a bill against your insurance. Yeah, that's happened a few times over the years, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Preventative maintenance and tuning of the system is done annually to make sure everything's in peak performance.
in terms of your responsibilities, kind of above and beyond our maintenance, is these tower site locations. They're going to be yours, right? You're gonna own this, so you got to make sure that you guys, you know, keep the yard clean, plow the entrance to the tower site in case something goes wrong and we need to get to it, right? Have Public Works take care of that. There are some utilities that you'll have, electrical and, you know, propane tanks and stuff like that. But from a maintenance standpoint, pretty much all in, you know, like there's some things like that we don't do. We don't do our own like generator maintenance. So as your tower site owners, you know, I can't remember if it's once a year, you have someone come out and maintain generators. You do that now on your sites? Yeah. That type of thing that responsibilities that you'll have as owners, that I think, you know, these guys are probably very familiar with that.
What's the average cost for a annual maintenance agreement?
A couple $100,000.
$275,
Yeah.
as quoted,
Is it?
That's, yeah, that's-
$275,000 a year. And from what I'm hearing, but correct me if I'm wrong, you can't do this project and not have a maintenance agreement, because we've gotta keep the programming up to date. So, I mean, you can't do one without the other.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love for someone to tell me I'm wrong on that.
No, you're right on that, yeah,
You
don't
have
do
to
a project,
include
you
that.
can't do that, right.
Sure,
Yeah.
How about you two? What questions do you have?
My big question was on the Norway Tower,
Mhm.
could there be an exemption? Okay, cause we have a new building and a new generator there.
And from what I understand in talking to Diane, that much of that equipment can be reutilized, correct?
You've got generators you want moved to the new site, and that's always something that we can do, like, we
Would
can do
that
something like that. You're not doing
decrease?
anything else to that site.
Yeah, the question really be, can we decommission the site?
Yeah,
and-
there's nothing
and
else that's
move it?
running at the site that would need it, then we could move it to the new site.
While we're building
But
this.
you're shaking your head, no, you can't, that tower's gonna
City
be.
of Norway has equipment on that tower too. So,
Oh.
I mean, we can make them, I mean, I don't know whether there's even a written agreement or not. We can make them get their own generator and put it in its place, but that's a small cost anyway. Bigger cost is a new building. We got a brand new radio equipment building sitting there that's basically gonna be obsolete to us.
And those buildings, maybe I'm wrong, but look like they're over 100,000 apiece.
They can be, depending on the
I
size
mean,
you
as,
need.
as quoted.
They're about 45,000
Well,
right
I think,
now.
I think
Maybe
we've,
I looked at it wrong.
for like,
Well, no, brand new, refurbished, which is what almost every county that we've done it with uses.
yeah, we use refurbished shelters, cause you could save a ton of money, and they're.
And Norway may not have even, I understand the generator cost isn't a lot
To a
compared to a
city
project
like
like
that,
this,
it is.
but to a city like that,
Yeah.
they probably don't have that budget.
Here's my only question about the Norway site. Has anybody ever diligently approached SIPO for an exemption? I don't wanna hear from an engineering firm that they say, oh, you can't do it. Has anybody actually formally written a letter to the SIPO requesting an exemption to build a taller tower next to the cemetery?
I don't know.
And why don't we try that?
That could be a-
I think that could absolutely be, because we have to lock in these sites. So I
Yes,
think
we
that,
do.
you know, we have the ability to go down that path of figuring that
I
out.
mean, it can't take that long.
Oh, well, that was gonna be my question, what's the time frame on that type of exemption request?
I have no idea.
I've never had anybody do one.
Yeah, I don't know.
But why not? Because
Why not?
the whole thing is, nobody at the cemetery is gonna be too disturbed about us building a higher tower.
Do you really
So the
know?
whole thing seems absurd to me, but why not write a letter to them and ask?
You can stand at that tower, you can see the cemetery,
Yeah,
Yes, you can.
but where the other tower is north and west, Tracy's absolutely right, you can't see the cemetery from there.
But you can't use your old building over,
But I can't.
No.
because you still need it while you're building the new tower.
Exactly.
As well as
They
Norway's
have
probably gonna
enough
need it.
equipment that we could just
Well,
put
there's
an
two-
outdoor cabinet in there for them and then take your building
I
over
don't know how
to
to
the.
look into it.
Cause that might be
But
one way.
while we're building this, see, we've still got all power equipment running off of the old tower.
Right.
Mhm.
And you already gotta have a new building at the new tower site if we have to go to the new tower, you already have to have that in place, so if we do a greenfield tower site in Norway, there's no question it's a new generator, new building, which just adds to the cost. I mean, if we're, you know, if we're trying to save $227,000 on end user radio equipment, I'd like to try to save another 50 to 100,000 on a generator in a building by using the current tower site. If we could get an exemption, I just, my
Scott,
brain
if you could
tells
get an
me that
exemption, we'd be happy
my,
to.
my
Like,
brain
we've
tells
never had
me
any-
rules are written with certain circumstances in mind, that it's not 100% you have to do this.
So-
Would the exemption, would the letter need to come from the the county, or who would a letter need to come from to even get an answer?
I would think it would be the county. You know, Scott, I think that, cause like, what you're talking about, going down that path of trying, hey, absolutely, I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's what that detailed design review process is for. I think the last thing we would wanna do is come in, exclude costs that we think are a strong possibility, if not likelihood, and then turn around and say, hey, you know what, it's gonna be $250,000 more because you couldn't get that exemption, and we told you could have. You know, so we don't wanna go down that path.
So the contract's got the new tower, the new building,
Yeah.
no generator though, right?
No, it's got a
Well,
generator.
Oh, it's got the generator.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's where, like, through that detailed design review, right, there's, we had mentioned that there's a sign off at the end of that, where if, you guys have to agree to that, right? So, we don't move forward at that point unless you've agreed. So, let's say what Scott's talking about happens, and there's the cost savings of a generator, right? We would take that cost out of our proposal and do an amendment at that time.
So basically what we're doing here today is trying to take advantage of the $7,053,000 quote and get it locked in, as well as that $227,000 discount before November 30th. That's what we're doing here. These other things are things we can, the hurdles we can look at, correct?
Yeah.
So my question to you two, is there any reason we should not enter into this agreement now?
The only other point that was brought up by the 911 board is they were more comfortable separating the civils out from the radio equipment vendor. All the other counties around us have Raycom has overseen the civils process and all the other projects, we get that. Our 911 board, who doesn't have the $7 million skin in the game, right? That had to come from you, was more comfortable with separating those out so there's more oversight. Does it have to? No, it's just a recommendation from them.
My concern is if they're going to have a comprehensive maintenance agreement, that's the equipment that they're familiar with and not something that came from Kmart.
No, this was separating the civils portion, which means the tower sites, the generators,
What's,
the
Scott,
buildings.
if you could, they have a rationale for that, what's their rationale? Why did they feel that that would be how they would prefer it?
Just separation of duties and better oversight, with lack of a better term. I mean, it's nothing against Raycom. I don't want anybody listening on Zoom land to think that. It was just their comfort level of all our eggs are in one basket at this point with this contract. And there is another process for, 911 board already has a consultant, we'll continue to have the consultant, True North, through this entire process overseeing it anyway. But their comfort level was having True North write up RFP and actually hire, take bids, choose a civil engineering firm, and True North would oversee that process. And then those two
Would
would have to
work
work together to work with
Raycom
Raycom for what they needed, but it's not a have to.
How many counties have you done the whole ball of wax for?
A bunch. Iowa County, Tama County, Buchanan County, Story County,
Probably Washington.
Well, let's go the other way.
Not Washington? Okay.
Who has used, so Washington used their own engineer, civil engineer.
Well, there's kind of, they used True North, but like True North, we also bid out the civil piece.
I would
So,
assume
but having our oversight, typically, we have to go out and check everything they do. And there's many times when we don't have full control over it, where somebody's out doing something, our guy goes out and sees it, says that isn't right. And so then it's gotta be
yeah,
changed.
so the consultant you have likes to do that, where they like to separate it out. And, we personally don't like that at all. Because, well, from an accountability standpoint, right, all that tower civil work is being done to support the radio system. Those guys need to be held accountable on a daily basis. if they don't do the grounding right, and if they take shortcuts and stuff, it's a daily management of what they are doing. And in the case of Dubuque County, those were separated. We ended up changing the contract where I think they paid us an extra $200,000 to daily manage the work that those guys were doing. So at the end of the day, we're held accountable to the performance of the radio system. We would much rather have the responsibility for doing it all correctly. So we feel like it's in the customer's best interest, and quite frankly, it makes our job a little bit easier, because otherwise we're trying to hold someone who accountable for a job that we're not the one paying their bills. So, from a control standpoint, we feel like we can deliver a better solution, more economically, and it's just better if we can control the whole thing. So,
Where are the other towers that need to be built located?
well, there was just 2 greenfields.
Oh,
I think the other 3 were existing towers.
She showed you on that map.
So, what other questions does either EMA or 911 board and or sheriff have?
The other question was end user radios. And I know Rick put an analogy to somebody that we want the fireman who gets 6 calls a year to be able to pick it up and use it without question, and use the radio so it works every time. That's what we wanna happen in the end.
Not an iPhone, you want flip phone, right?
Yes. Okay, so what's the question though? I mean, is there some issue that wouldn't work?
I guess we need to see, I've not seen the radios. We would like to.
You guys demoed those last year, remember?
And we'll be like.
Well, I think what Ron's getting at is,
We wanna
on a
keep
day-to-day
this-
basis, Scott and his department, your department, could handle the more sophisticated radios. Not that there's, radios for dummies, but essentially wanna pick up the radio and turn it on and use it for the guy that is gonna handle it about 6 times a year.
So
That's
was
correct.
there an
So-
issue with some of the folks expressed that they didn't like the radios that were being demoed?
We haven't done with this, so I'm gonna back up. None of this was put in this year's budget, and none of this was put in this year's not to exceed levy. So we were on a track that we had another whole year before we were gonna have to deal with this. And we had, when I say we, the 911 board and Ron and Dan Ramblesberg and I that are spearheading this project, we were gonna take, over the course of this late fall, winter, look at all the different options, look at some other different end user radios, get them in the hands of some of our responders that are gonna use them and say, do you like this brand better, do you like this brand? Because the system they're putting in, the base system, is a P25 system that any P25 radio should be able to access. There are other radio brands out there that can access this system. It doesn't have to be Harris end user radios. What we're looking for is what Ron said. The best quality radio for the lowest price and the easiest to use in the hands of a fire department that gets 6 calls a year and they have to switch to a tactical frequency. They gotta be able to easily be able to do that. So we wanted to look at those options. This automatically puts a certain brand of model number of Harris radio, that's what we're gonna buy, period. We don't get a choice.
Well, I don't know that
To
that's
save that
correct.
kind of money, if
I
you
think
wanna
I
make
asked Diane this question point blank, and I believe you told me that you can have a higher sophistication of a radio for those that use it day in, day out, and a flip phone for those that don't.
There are
And you
various
would,
models,
right.
right? And
Right.
so like Mike Day had us put the top of the line in on this for all the portables. And so there are other models that have less bells and whistles for the users, which like Iowa County, Tama County, they did the same thing. They picked out a different model of Harris radio that they could use for fire and some of the folks that didn't want all the fancy. They wanted it simple, all I gotta do is push to talk and I don't need anything
Yeah.
else.
And you would adjust make an amendment to your dollar figure if half of those radios were of less cost, correct?
Right.
Okay, but to hear what Scott's saying, your proprietary brand is Harris. So there's other companies that make it, so you have various models within the Harris radio range,
Mhm.
but I don't know the other company names, but
And I won't name them,
but,
there's just other.
but they'll be off the table.
Well, here's,
For purchase.
For the initial
For the initial
purchase.
purchase, yes.
Harris gave us the discount
Right.
based, to offer to you based on the infrastructure, the end user subscriber
Right.
units and the maintenance. And then after that, yes, other counties have added Kenwoods, they've added, tape radios, and we sell a
And
lot.
Scott, do you feel that's a big issue?
I don't think it's a big issue, no, I'm reiterating what came up within our meetings with 911. That's what I'm here to say, so that everybody hears everything, and I did my due diligence, and I said, these are the things we were talking about. We also don't have, because we didn't think about it early on, it wasn't even on our radar, it's come up with just the last few months of meetings, that secondary roads is not included in this system.
We need to bring them on.
And we feel they are part of our public safety response, and they should be on this system too. We don't have a count of their radios yet.
so
That would be fairly simple for us to get and get.
Right, but this particular contract with the number of radios we estimated in the public safety realm, it's gonna be more.
so that's gonna be a change
Amendment,
order.
change
Sure.
order, whatever.
Which makes sense, but you're not gonna have to put up more towers
No,
to throw secondary roads in there.
no,
I think the big thing is that we're forgetting here is November 30th, November 30th.
it's,
If we don't act on this by then, the 7 million is gonna go up by at least 10%, according to Terry, right? So that's $700,000, and the $225,000 discount's gonna go away. That's $1 million, people. That'd buy a lot of radios.
And Scott's not as concerned about this as I am. When we're done and moving forward, I want this to be maintained as a true radio system. So moving forward, I would not propose letting somebody else's, another vendor's equipment on this system, because we have a contract to have all this stuff
Mhm.
fixed, checked, maintained,
Makes sense.
so
Yeah.
I don't,
Well, the savings here would pay for 5 years maintenance agreement.
I don't wanna end up with any mix match, I want it to all be
Yeah.
the same.
I agree. Yeah.
So we have a consultant, True North. Have they looked at this contract?
yeah.
And do they have any issues with it? Other than what you guys have already raised?
No. No,
Okay.
in fact, they recommended, they were the firm that recommended we do the bond at 8.2 to cover any possible contingency that we run into, because they're gonna happen. Have you done one yet that you haven't had a change order?
Well, there's gonna be some sort of.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right, so
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
that's the reason for the 8.2 bonding, so that we didn't have to come back and visit that again.
Is there any reason to believe that if we put this out for a proposal next year, that the prices are gonna go down, or anything instead?
No, they're not going down.
So you guys have a
Watch Corey
recommendation
out.
for the board?
Knock off this door.
I don't have a problem with that. Go out that door, you gotta make, watch it, it turns green at the top. Okay,
My log go around.
go out that door.
The best if you can to do it.
Anything we've talked about that came from us or the 911 board as far as issues we wanted to pursue are not anything that would stop the contract as written. No.
I do not believe
Well, this looks like $1 million savings to me. What do we need to do to get off dead center?
I think we need to give.
You want a motion? Yeah.
Oh,
Okay,
okay,
well, I just wanna make sure that these are the guys that deal with the radios all the time.
Okay, okay.
I would like to give the county attorney a little more time to review the contract, make sure he's happy with it all, and maybe come back Tuesday.
Last thing I wanna do is get a oops and suddenly we're at December 1.
Tuesday.
Well, here's where I'm at on this thing. I've gone through it. I don't profess that I understand all 179 pages of the diagrams and everything. I think that there is some merit to have another agency involved or another firm involved, but I don't see how you do that at this stage and keep to the timetable they've thrown out with their prices increasing, and having to put it out for rebid.
I do not believe that's possible.
So if that's the case,
And True North has looked, we had a sit down 6 months ago.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. With, after their initial contract was so that we could see what we even needed to bond for, what kind of money we were looking for. Terry and Diana and Mike Day with True North and Ron and I sat down in my office and went over it, and Mike brought out some points and they were addressed, corrected. And so, as far as the general language of the contract, our consultant firm doesn't have a problem with what the system design is and what they're doing and what it will accomplish. He's in agreement with it, will get us what we need.
I mean, I guess unless you guys have specific questions that you're gonna, outside of this meeting, sit down with me and say, what about this, or hey, this is what we feel about that. I don't know that you need to take it next Tuesday.
I do not have any questions that are gonna come to that, Dave.
As far as the tower sites, we've been talking about purchasing one of your existing towers that's up.
Right.
Is that one of the 5?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yes.
Gosh, you'd really sell this deal if you just throw that in. Wouldn't that be a
Unless
nice-
you use it for 18 months free so
I
far,
know,
how about we
it's a
throw
nice
that
gesture
in?
of just tossing it in.
I like his thinking.
$25,000 price, to just kind of throw that in. We could get the cookies in the oven today.
I appreciate your eagerness. Yeah, we are like, because even with this timing and this deadline, I mean, we're very concerned about it because of, I heard yesterday that inflation has been 6.2% and it's rising. Yeah. And so, think about like the timing of when we quoted this thing for you. I mean, it was quite a while ago. So that's why we're trying to honor a commitment that has been extended several times. And I appreciate it, Dave, but we can't. We don't have any flexibility in that price.
I just thought I'd throw it in. Not as many corn dogs as 227,000, but still. Well, I guess my take on it would be this, obviously you do have time if you consider this next Tuesday. But what's gonna change between now and then?
Nothing from me.
Nothing from me.
I mean, I assume that the law enforcement and E911 board recommendation is that this is the procedure or the process you wanna follow, which is the company. And again, if you separated out, the civil to another firm, wouldn't that just delay this quite a bit? Which then throws the prices all off. I mean, so I understand that there is benefit to having another engineering firm and outfit involved. But also, you have some time is of the essence and price increase questions that are not inconsiderable.
$1 million, yeah.
So my only other question then for the supervisors is, this wasn't in the budget, where's the 700,000 coming from?
American funds, I believe is where you were.
That's
You
only
can
one
only
for
cover
broadband.
this, yeah, so
Okay.
you have to be very careful with
Alright.
that too.
Okay, so have we got a way to come up with it?
Not the difference, there's no, certain funds are only used for certain things.
Okay.
We agreed with this ARP to pay for the civil portion.
would you refresh my memory, the first 10% is due when? So within a certain time frame of signing this contract?
Yeah, I mean, standard is will be within 30 days of signing, you know.
Well, you'd be in a situation where you have to get a loan. If you don't have the money in the budget, and I'm assuming you probably don't have the money in the budget for that first payment.
We amended the budget for the spending authority for the ARP fund to cover the civils is what we did.
With respect to that timing, Dave, I could probably be more flexible with that if you needed an extra 15 or 30 days or something like that, because to me, it's more important for me to be able to turn around and do commitments and lock in the pricing of what we have to buy. And so,
Is
if you need an extra, literally like 30 days or whatever to line up the down payment, I would rather do that than delay this, because I gotta commit on this before the prices keep going up.
We probably should have invited Nathan.
The payment schedule, what part of that is this again?
Section
You
9.
can't use that ARP.
Thank you.
For the civil
I
portion,
think
but
there's
like
6
for what
different
he's
milestones, Dave.
discussing, I don't.
Yeah, cause I know it's like starts off 10%, and then another
Back,
10%.
not just
I think it's 10, 20, 20, 20.
We had to be specific for COVID for that ARP.
Assuming 20, sir.
What's it?
Assuming 20.
Well, if they got 20, if I
We'd
estimate.
have to- I
The
don't-
first and
that's why
last
I wanted
are
to hire that outside
10.
consultant, because there's that gray area, how do you, if we haven't been told.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
One way or the other, it's covered.
How about I make a call to Ashley?
Okay, so
Actually,
it looks like the next payment of 20% under your schedule would be April 30th.
Well, that's an approximation, it's after we do all this tower site investigating, lock in the,
It's whenever you get that done.
whenever we get it done.
And you're anticipating it might be April 30th, just to put.
Yeah, but it usually takes at least a few months, like 3 to 6 months is what is typical.
If it's 6 months, we're already into the next.
So 10% is gonna be 980,000?
No, it's
700.
not the maintenance, not 10% of the
Okay,
maintenance.
so
just-
700,000.
Yeah.
And so, see, that was the portion where we would need to know what portion of that would be for the civils, broken down. There's just so many stipulations on that funding that we got, so.
Because as far, well, you know, one of the whole things with the milestone payments is we're trying to match our own cash flow with the project.
Right.
Which you could argue, everything that we're doing starting off right now, besides the basic design, is pursuing those civils. So I think you probably have some flexibility there as to how you want to
Right,
allocate.
but I would like to get questions answered from.
We need to set this up so that whenever we're doing it, we set the whole project up so that we don't have to go back in and do a budget amendment and all that
Correct.
stuff.
I mean,
And
I
the,
like
and the
We could
civils
modify
are,
the contract to say
again,
the
that's
first
the tower
initial down
construction.
payment is
Yeah,
for
yeah,
civils.
yeah.
yeah, I mean, cause I think it,
And
At
then you'd be
this point-
contractually compliant with what they're
right,
looking for.
and so you have how much targeted or budgeted for civils
2
yet
million.
this year? 1 million, you said?
2.
2. So why don't we do this then? It would be a speck of a rewrite, but not much.
Yeah.
Why don't you change the payment schedule to say that the first 10% or whatever that number is will be for the civils?
Okay.
it's at the House and Senate right now, so they're trying to pass it where it's gonna be not so limited to COVID. But at
But
this
at
current
this
time,
time,
it's
yeah.
still
But
limited
if you-
to
if they
COVID
could-
related.
Can we just do that like on our invoice? Not change the contract, just on the invoice, say what the payment's for, or you wanna change the payment terms?
I think that for budgeting purposes, she only has budgeting authority as we sit here right now for the civils, cause that's how you did your budget amendment, right?
For that ARP fund.
Yes.
And so if she tries to use it and someone contends it's for something else, when the auditors come in, that's who they're gonna slap all around.
Okay.
She didn't wanna be slapped all around, right? Nobody wants that.
No.
So.
Yeah, it all falls down on, I'm the one that gets audited, so.
Okay.
So do you think that, would that be possible to change a clause just a little bit and make it,
Yeah, I think what we wanna do is just, can we take it offline, and then we'll make sure that, like, work with you to make sure it reads the way it needs to read?
right,
Yeah.
and when you say take it offline, you mean you still want them to sign today with the idea that they'll amend it? Because there's no way legally she can make that 10% payment.
No, and.
Well, if
and
they
Without
approve
going-
today, I can go and get you that modified by morning, and then they can sign tomorrow.
And if you guys
Does
are
that make
okay, I
sense?
would
Sure, could you
pay
approve
that
it with
full
change?
an hourly
Then-
fee and
sure.
ask them
And then
a few
we'll
questions.
just email it.
Sure.
Because
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
what other counties are
Yeah.
doing,
They can,
because
they
there's
can make
such
a
a
motion
gray
to
area,
approve the
I don't wanna
contract
be
with the
responsible
understanding
for
I think
all
it's a
that.
good
change
CYA.
on this one term.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
And then the second we get that,
And
we
it-
Tracy
and it's
sees
your
the
A.
sign.
Cause I
Because
just
then
talked to
it's his
Buchanan
life on
County
the line.
Supervisor this morning,
And none of
they're
us are there
paying
for that, right?
other
That way we
firms
can
as well
email to you
to
today.
administer
Sure.
that
Yeah,
ARP.
absolutely great.
So,
That'd be good.
I just don't feel comfortable enough, not knowing, to say yes
That
or
way
no.
she's in
I'm
legal
good with it.
compliance with her auditing.
Mhm.
So what they were saying over here was, they think that they could email that change. It'd be the same contract, the same dollar amounts, but that first 10% payment would be towards the civils that have been legally budgeted for. And if you can approve that, they could email that either today or tomorrow, sometime yet this week. And since you've already approved it, Tracy can just sign it once that's.
We haven't approved, we approved.
If you
spending.
approve,
If we approve it now,
yes,
yeah.
you'd be approving this contract with the understanding we've got one clause that we have to change.
With the revised.
Yes.
So it's revised to reflect that the initial 10% down payment is going towards civils. It's kind of.
And that way she's in accordance with her auditing authority and the laws in that area. Yeah, I don't see that as a problem.
Does that work, Haley?
Yeah, and are you guys still okay if I do get charged a fee from that company to ask on that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I want that in the motion as well, 'cause I
I'll make
will.
the motion, if I can figure all this out,
Yeah.
that we approve the contract with Raycom and that we go with this amended portion.
Yes, and we're gonna approve this contract, but with the proviso, there's gonna be one term that's gonna be amended, and that first 10% payment that's due within, I think, 30 days of signing the contract will be going, the payment will be going 100% towards the civils that are part of this contract. Raycom will get me a draft of that, and if you'll approve it, once I verify that says that in that language, then I'll have Tracy sign it. I'll give Tracy a call, we'll get it signed, we'll give it back to Raycom. In the meantime, I didn't hear what part you wanted.
So what I would propose to do, there's some firms out there that are specific to administering this ARP funds. And other counties are utilizing, they charge by the hour, they will assess like what we're wanting to purchase and give us guidance a little bit more too. So,
My motion would also authorize her to do that.
cause you said we're not cutting the check today, it would be within so many days of them
Yeah, I
signing
think
it
you got 30
regardless.
days.
So
Yeah.
that would allow me time to know for sure too.
Is there anything that you folks are missing that you wanna do, that whenever we get through all this, there's gonna be something that comes up next month, next week?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we're very comfortable with what to do and how to move this forward.
Okay.
And I think that we're gonna jump into doing the tower site stuff and work with Scott about the Norway site and things like that.
And I know Nathan with DA Davidson Company, if you,
And we
David,
do have other locations already spotted if this doesn't work at Norway.
Yes, yes, yes.
So who's gonna write the letter to try and get this tower?
Scott,
Okay.
Do you want included with my
Thursday,
motion that we enter into the contract to purchase that tower over by Harrison? You want that
Separate.
separate?
Separate.
Okay, all right.
that we already got done anyway.
Oh, I
I'll
know
let
we
him,
did. Yeah,
I'll let him explain it after this is
okay,
done.
okay, all right.
we
Yeah,
never
we
did get
did
a
do that,
second,
that's right, yeah.
and we didn't get a second.
I know, and I'm waiting.
Mhm.
Second,
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Now we
Thank you
can
very much.
get
Thank
out
you.
the beer.
Looking forward to doing this with you. And Dave, should we send the contract to you, the modified?
Yes, but you're not gonna send me the whole.
Well, we were
All I'm
hoping to send
gonna
this
do is I'll
electronically.
put it on
Second first.
one drive and I'll send you a link to the whole thing, and that way you.
That'll be perfect.
Okay. And that way you don't
Yeah,
as
yes,
a whole.
cause I'm not gonna try to print all that out.
No, no, no.
And,
Send it to Tracy, he will.
keep these things, this guy.
I did
Diane.
once, I'm not doing it again.
Look, I'll get my card here.
So,
I thought everybody knew you too.
Can't believe that's gonna throw that tower in.
Dave,
Thank you.
explain now what's going on with the purchase in the tower.
Sure, well, first of all, let's get my fee down first. I'm teasing, of course. You mean in terms of the motion you just made?
No, no, what we did here last Tuesday about the tower that,
Oh.
the purchasing agreement. Where
what's
it's
Nick's-
sitting.
Nick's last name
Nick
is
Loney,
Loney?
yeah.
I spoke with Nick yesterday, had also spoke with him last week, and you folks have a law firm in the Marshall County area that's gonna get me, we have to change the terminology just slightly in the contract. Biggest things are the counties acquiring it, not the E-911 board.
Right.
And the contract says the E-911 board. Also, there's, anytime you have transactions of real estate, there's certain things like declaration of value and groundwater hazard statement that have to be prepared. One of those has to be prepared by the seller. So I gave Nick a list of the things that needs to be done and have spoke to him about that. And when he and I spoke yesterday, he said that they're not worried about it because we're proceeding.
And he was meeting with the law.
Yeah, he said it was gonna be
today.
sometime this week.
Yeah, today
So,
actually, so. should be-
I anticipate that it will be sometime this week.
That's why I talked to him yesterday, and because Haley was saying, talking about writing the check, and I said, let's wait till he's satisfied that he's got all the paperwork, we've signed it, it should be by the end of the week, and then you can cut that on your regular.
And so on that one too, we were discussing that, is that coming from the E-911 fund?
The tower
The
purchase?
tower purchase?
Yes,
Okay, so
yes, it is.
we did say that was E-911 funds earlier, we had that discussion earlier, I thought that was how it was, so.
Yes.
And so I thought that that's what the name of it should be, or who's taking title. I was wrong.
Well, I don't think the E-911 board can actually.
We can't
hold
own-
real estate.
We can't.
But for the fund,
It's just a
where it's
small-
coming out of,
Right.
so it'll be out of 4010.
The big thing was you wouldn't just throw that in out of that.
But I'm gonna get you some corn dogs, you can be
I
sure.
already
of
have
that.
It's against my religion.
I
believe
So
that's
it's under $3 worth.
Under, yeah, that's right, we got it.
$2.99.
State
He's an
guide.
elected official.
There's plenty of corn dogs priced under that.
Anything else, sir?
No?
You want a motion to adjourn?
Yes, I do.
You got it.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
But did you guys have this in your minutes, that that's the most money this county has ever spent before?